Educational Communications and this station present Environmental Directions with Nancy Pearlman. On this series, we explore the effects of human influence on the Earth's ecosystems and discuss solutions to environmental problems which affect the quality of life on this planet. Environmental Directions gives you the kind of information you need to help you participate in decisions impacting your community, the nation, and the world. Now, here's your host, Nancy Pearlman.
Hello. For the next half hour, we are going to be talking about protecting our oceans and making them healthy again, as well as creating a sustainable ocean or blue economy with my guest, Mark Spalding. He is president of the Ocean Foundation. He has had many positions in the past, from chairing the Confluence Philanthropy, commissioner for Sargasso Sea Commission, member of the Ocean Studies Board and the U.S. National Committee for the Decade of Ocean Science with the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine, chair of the Surfrider Foundation. He's currently a senior fellow with the Center for Blue Economy and also a member of the United Nations Environment Program's Guidance Working Group Sustainable Blue Economy Finance Initiative. He has formerly been an attorney with various law firms and has worked with numerous foundations, including the Loretta Bay Foundation, St. Kitts Foundation, the Orca Fund of the San Diego Foundation, and he has held various academic positions at different universities and has had previous fellowships, including one with the Center for U.S.-Mexican Studies at the University of California, San Diego, as well as the Donella Meadows Leadership Fellow Sustainability Institute. Welcome. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you very much for the invitation and such a generous introduction. Great to be here.
I am thrilled to have you on the program because you have been doing incredible work for decades to protect our oceans, to make our environment sustainable, to help communities as well as ecosystems and wildlife. It's really extensive, and I do want to get into some of the specific initiatives that you have worked on and how you have developed cooperative efforts with investment funds. But first, let's talk about the oceans themselves, because we do call the Earth the blue planet. Water, the oceans, is much bigger than the land masses on the planet, and we have over 3 billion people depending on the oceans for their food, the blue economy. We have over 90% of everything traded in the world is traveling by ship. The oceans are extensive, and when I grew up, everybody thought it was going to feed humanity forever and you could pollute it forever, throw everything in there, but we found out that's not the case, is it?
It is not. We thought we could throw anything away we wanted and take as much out of the ocean as we wanted. It's clear that it's no longer possible. We have to stop putting bad things in and stop taking all the good things out.
I recall that the first real awareness of the oceans was when Jacques Cousteau created films about them. But the oceans are so extensive, we really know very little. We're sending people out into space, but we haven't even explored the ocean floor and all the wildlife that is there. What do you think we need to extensively look at and understand about our oceans?
Your fundamental point is spot on. We do not know as much about the ocean as we know about the face of the moon. We have failed to really examine it and study it in the way that it deserves, given that it is the life system, the life support system for our planet. It produces every other breath you take. It produces protein for 1 out of 7 people every single day, and it absorbs all of our excess heat and makes this planet livable. And we need to understand how it works so that we can protect it and protect our life support system. That's how critical doing this right is.
We know so little about our oceans. What scientific research and exploration do we need to engage in to be able to protect the oceans?
So right now, there's a worldwide effort going on to map the sea floor, something that's never been completely done before. When the airplane went down near Southeast Asia, we had no idea what we were looking at. much less how we would go about finding that airplane, and we never did find it. We are also beginning to understand more about the ocean's chemistry, physical ocean currents movements. There is so much we really need to understand and how it affects all of us.
How much of a problem is there with seabed mining and other extractive resources of our oceans?
In the 1970s, we agreed in the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea that we were going to go do seabed mining. But at the time, we had no idea how to do it or what we were going to do. There's a big flurry of activity right now suggesting doing it, but we're not ready. We don't know what the harm is going to be. We do believe there is significant environmental harm, but there could also be harm to fisheries and other things. Many, many countries have joined in a worldwide moratorium and putting the brakes on, asking everybody to step back, look at this, and decide whether it's safe to do, whether it's worth doing from an economic standpoint, and not make a mistake of running headlong into it because it's new and shiny and exciting.
As an environmentalist for decades, I have been reading about what is going into the ocean, and I worry so much about the pollution. I worry about the microplastics that the animals are eating, and then we eventually in our food chain may absorb in our bodies, and how dangerous it all is. I recall training for the Ironman triathlon and swimming out into the ocean to the end of raw sewage outfalls. Have we eliminated this kind of pollution?
We have done a very, very good job with the Clean Water Act and various other acts to address things like sewage outfall and other kinds of pollution. But we haven't done what we need to do for things like you mentioned of plastic microparticle pollution and other types of pollution that make it through our wastewater treatment plants. We're dumping all of that plastic into the ocean. We're dumping medicines and other things into the ocean that go through the system and contaminate the ocean. The amount of plastic in the ocean is mind-boggling. You cannot any longer catch a fish or anything that you would normally eat from the ocean and not find plastic in it. It is that pervasive, that extended. We have better stop it very, very soon, because not only is the plastic itself a problem, but plastic is very sticky. Viruses, toxins, germs, you name it, stick to plastic much better than they stick to just about anything else. So it's a vector for harm.
There's another element about the oceans in terms of the relationship to the land. Wetlands are rather a mix between the ocean and the land, and where there's a lot of nurseries for different sea life and food. And yet here in California, where I am, over 95%, I don't know the current figure, of wetlands have been destroyed. There's so little left, and yet birds need the wetlands for migratory purposes. The areas that used to be wetlands just have mostly disappeared, and even around the world, the wetlands have been destroyed. People are taking wetlands. Countries are turning wetlands into marinas for boats and ships. The plant life, the mangrove forests are disappearing. And I recall visiting the most sustainable green hotel in the world, Jean-Michel Cousteau's resort in Fiji, where they had the tourists help replant the mangrove forests and help the local community to restore our wetlands. Are we going to succeed in doing that?
I think we are eventually going to succeed in doing that because we have to. There is no alternative than doing the right thing at this point. We need to restore seagrasses, mangroves, and estuaries as systems that will take up and store carbon, that will filter pollution, that will prevent storm surge reaching where we live on the land. And it is absolutely critical to do that. Our problem here is that we have allowed the degradation of the ocean to get too extensive. We're losing those estuaries, as you described. We're losing coral reefs. We're losing all sorts of other systems that we rely upon for the function of the ocean, for feeding ourselves, for feeding the food chain in the ocean, for the health of the ocean. And we need to restore the abundance of the ocean. We need to restore its functionality. Otherwise, we're not going to survive. Those estuaries absorb tremendous amounts of runoff, nutrients from the land and other pollution, and prevent storm surges. They're absolutely critical to everything around them surviving. We see these stories now of huge devastation from storms. Well, if you go dig into them a little bit, you'll find that in many cases we lost the mangroves or estuaries or seagrass that protected those places. Right now, the Ocean Foundation has the largest mangrove restoration project in the United States going on in Puerto Rico, and the mangroves were damaged by a hurricane, but they protected the communities near them, and they protected critically a power plant. And so there was one small part of Puerto Rico that retained its power production after that hurricane, and it was because of nature protecting it. We're really hopeful that we can restore that system of mangroves there before there's another storm.
I'm here in Southern California, in Los Angeles. I grew up in Orange County. I rode my horse on the Santa Ana riverbed, and the birds would fly up into the riverbed miles from the ocean, and yet in the 80s they paved it. The Santa Ana River goes 50 miles from Riverside County to the beaches, and yet all that silt, all the water, it's not being absorbed into the aquifers. The beaches aren't getting what they used to get, and they've done this all along the coastline. They are destroying the interrelationship. Are we going to be able to restore these kinds of ecosystems?
I have worked with the Surfrider Foundation and other groups who have advocated for restoring the natural processes of the beaches, including the sand that comes from rivers and river systems. I have worked with them and other groups to try and remove dams and other structures that prevent free flow of rivers and their connection to the ocean and the connection that they provide in the way of sand and such. Yes, we are succeeding in that conversation because everybody understands it. It's mechanical. We know that the sand is there, it moves. We know that the sand and the breadth of the beach helps protect human infrastructure behind the beach, and if it all gets wiped out, then the cliffs start eroding and the houses sitting on those cliffs start falling. All of this has to be done, and in that case, it's something we actually do understand and do understand what we need to do to restore it.
There are so many initiatives that need to be carried out throughout the world, and particularly here in the United States. You work both domestically and internationally. You see the relationship between protecting the environment and the economy. For example, your organization has the Seagrass Grow program, which is a blue carbon offset program. Can you describe that?
Yes, it's exactly what it sounds like. We have calculated how much carbon that seagrass, mangroves, and estuary grasses take up, move into the soil, and store, and for how long. We can, within reason, calculate how many tons of carbon, say, your flight from Los Angeles to my coast, to the East Coast, produces, and plant that much of any of those plant systems, blue carbon systems, in the ocean to offset that. But we also have to remember that we get all those other benefits I was describing a moment ago: storm surge protection, habitat protection, and all the other aspects that those systems provide us, not just the carbon that they can take up and store. There's a lot of other benefits.
Who is buying these offsets?
Right now, these are voluntary offsets where people donate an amount of money and we take care of doing the restoration work and conservation work. Some of the money is coming from individuals, some of it's coming from corporations, and some of it's even coming from football teams. And it is a nascent, early stage effort, and a lot more needs to be done to understand it. We're going through the process of certification so that there is a tradable offset or a sellable offset, which has been done in other types of circumstances. But there's more critical analysis now than when people started offering offsets. And I think that's really good because we really want these to be real. We want them to be additive. We want them to be measurable. And if it's none of those things, then we're wasting our time and energy. We really really have to make sure these things are as real as they possibly can.
You have many programs with the Ocean Foundation where you help and assist other organizations, other communities, many different kinds of projects. What are they?
We do philanthropic advisory service for donors. We do fiscal sponsoring for people with great projects and ideas. We have 4 initiatives of our own: Blue Resilience, Science Equity, Plastics, and Ocean Heritage, and then the work you and I talked about on Blue Economy.
You're doing so much to protect the oceans and to create this blue economy, and there's so many different programs and initiatives that we shall talk about when we return in a moment with my guest, Mark Spalding, who is president of the Ocean Foundation.
Environmental Directions with Nancy Pearlman continues with further discussion of the world's critical ecological issues. For more information, you may call 310-559-9160 or go to www.ecoprojects.org. Now, here's Nancy.
I'm speaking with Mark Spalding. He is president of the Ocean Foundation. This is a major organization that has really focused on creating what we hope will be the blue economy by 2030 to be over $3.2 trillion. What will that entail?
When I say the blue economy, I want you to think of green business. Green business is that subset of all businesses who are trying to be green, trying to be sustainable, trying to do the right thing. The blue economy is that subset of the ocean economy who's trying to be sustainable, who's trying to do the right thing. And what I'm really excited about this is we have proven that this is real and that we can both produce investment returns, some good for the economy, and restore the ocean's abundance at the same time. We are advising 4 different public equity portfolios. We're working with about 14 private equity firms, and we're working with a couple of banks on fixed equity, trying to think of all the different mechanisms for investing in things that are actively good for the ocean, but will also make a return for investors. I'll just give you one very quick example that I use a lot, and that is one of the threats to all of us is the introduction of alien invasive species into our bays and harbors. Well, the obvious thing to do about that is clean up the ballast water from ships that's being dumped that brings those species to our ports and harbors. So our job in the blue economy is to look for the sectors and the individual businesses within those sectors who are addressing that problem and pick the best ones, invest in them, put money behind them, and help them succeed. And in the end will be the profit from that company providing that service, but it will also be that we stop the introduction of alien invasive species in our bays and harbors. They become cleaner, safer, and other species survive because they're not being crowded out by invaders. That's how we like to think about this, is that win for the environment, that win for the investor, and the win ultimately for the ocean overall.
That is so significant. You mentioned your Ocean Engagement Fund, which is basically a bridge between Wall Street and the blue planet that sustains everything. You've worked with Credit Suisse, which is now UBS, the Rockefeller Asset Management. You've been an advisor to many investment funds. Are they receptive, or do you have to convince them that they really need to make some changes because we truly need to have an economy that is protecting the environment, not destroying it?
So we don't have to do a lot of work to convince investors. There's a lot of investors who care about both making money and protecting the ocean. Those two things are not mutually exclusive. What's really fascinating is the engagement fund that you mentioned. Very simply, we buy stock in companies who may be harming the ocean, and then we literally engage their management and suggest that they make changes in what they're doing, changes in their products, their practices, their services, their packaging, you name it, that will be good for the ocean. We've found that we have about a 95 or better success rate in convincing them to make change. Part of that is because we come with the business case as to why they should do it, why it's good for public relations, why it's good for their bottom line, why sometimes it even saves them money to do things the right way instead of the way they've been doing them. It's really, really remarkable. Again, I'll give you one quick example. We bought stock in a shipping company, and they were recycling their ships at the end of life, what's called ship breaking. But they were doing it on the beaches in India, and young children were being killed as they did this work by hand, and the beach and the near shore was being polluted as the ships were taken apart. We went into this company and we said, look, you have a chance to do this right. You don't have to do it this way. You can comply with an international agreement that tells you how to do it, and we can prevent the pollution of the beach and coast. We can prevent these young children essentially being maimed or killed while they're doing this work. And the shipping company listened to us, listened to our economic argument, listened to our social and environmental arguments, and they eventually agreed to do what we asked them to do, and that was to comply with the Hong Kong Convention and the European improvement on the Hong Kong Convention to take care of liquids from the ships properly. They then convinced their government, so not the U.S., different government, to invest in those same villages in India to bring them up to the international standards, so they didn't even have to abandon the communities they had worked with for so many years, and could create jobs that were safe and that helped clean up the harm and damage to the environment that had been done in the past. That's the kind of success I want to keep going after as we do these engagements with companies.
Is there any country that is really doing a good job protecting the oceans?
That's a great question. There are a number of countries, including the United States, who have done a very good job on managing fisheries, which was, of course, the thing we all started working on first, because that's the place where we all eat fish. Therefore, we focus on that. Right now, there's a huge focus on protecting 30% of the ocean by 2030, and there are certain countries like Cuba and a few others who are way ahead in the percentage of their waters that they've protected, and they are succeeding. There are countries who are doing better than others on shipping and emissions from shipping and other things like that. So it's not a single country succeeding across all fronts, but we are seeing a lot of effort being made and a lot of great strides and accomplishment by different countries depending on their abilities, frankly, to really contribute.
You have so many wonderful success stories and models of programs that could be followed in so many different areas and industries. It's easy to find out more about what you do by going to your website, oceanfoundation.org, but you abbreviate it, OCEANFDN.org.
Correct.
You yourself have really combined so many different fields of interest and expertise, from your work as a lawyer, from your work in teaching, educating people, your work internationally. I'm really in awe of what you are accomplishing in terms of making these connections between trying to do something to protect our oceans, and of course it's very important because oceans have a major role in climate regulation, and as well as keeping the economies going in the different countries and locally in the different villages and communities. For example, you worked with resorts to try and show them how they could be more sustainable, and I recall defining the term ecotourism back in the 90s to try and get travel industry to be more ecological. You've worked internationally where you created international agreement called the Nairobi Statement. What regulations are necessary? What do we have internationally and nationally that is a success or that we need to do more of?
International law is really about mutual collaboration. It's an agreement among nations that they're going to each play a role in addressing, the extinction of species, or address climate change, or address how shipping is done. And more of these international agreements have provisions that allow us to do more with them, have them be more enforceable, have them be more clear. They also allowed us to go beyond even national jurisdiction. One of the great successes, which is actually coming up here in a moment, January 17th, 2026, the High Seas Treaty will go into effect. This is a treaty that says how we, many nations of the world, are going to govern the areas of the high seas, the areas that are beyond anyone's national jurisdictions, the literal, no person's water that is beyond the 200 miles that any nation claims, that is out there and right now is completely the Wild West. Anybody can take anything they want, do anything they want, and we've sat down over 20-something years to negotiate, but we negotiated an agreement on how we're going to govern the areas beyond national jurisdiction, how we're going to share what's there, how we're going to protect what's there, how we're going to create protected areas within that for special things that are there, such as the Sargasso Sea that you mentioned earlier that I was a commissioner to protect. This is a real opportunity, and that's just one example of an international agreement basically changing the face of the planet and how we are going to think about how we act on our planet going forward.
You mentioned that Wild West of the international waters that nobody is really controlling, and so we find that many nations allow overfishing of the oceans. They allow the continued killing of whales and dolphins and other sentient beings. They are allowing the pollution that is destroying coral reefs all over, including the Great Barrier Reef. It's extensive. What new law can be created that nations will put a stop to some of this destruction?
So sometimes it is the power of shame. If most countries agree that we're not going to kill sharks anymore, as happened at the Convention on Biological Diversity in 2025, those who allow it to continue can be exposed. They can be shamed into realizing that they are the outlaws. They are the ones who are not consistent with international opinion. They're not consistent where the right thing to do is. And we have to have that moral suasion to convince those who are now, because of an agreement like that among a majority of countries, who are now breaking the law. That's our goal. There's no court we can take a country to per se. We do have some international courts of justice and other things like that. We can put fines on them if they invade another country. We can put sanctions on. We can take away some of their trading rights, things like that. But it has to do with ultimately convincing them to do the right thing. And we can use sanctions to do that. We can use moral suasion to do that. We can use economic arguments.
What are some of the other programs, initiatives that the Ocean Foundation is involved with?
So the Ocean Foundation does philanthropic advisory services. So we help many individual, corporate, and government donors do grant making and other support for conservation around the world. Second, we do a lot of fiscal hosting. So we have approximately 60 projects who raise their own money and do their own work, but we take care of all the support they need, all the back office, payroll, benefits, insurance, in order for them to succeed. And then we have our own projects. One is the Blue Resilience Initiative, which does the seagrass, mangrove, and estuary restoration work. The second initiative is our Ocean Science Equity Initiative, and it's focused on helping scientists in small island developing states and coastal LDCs actually get to participate in science, be in the earliest stages of co-designing science research, then getting ship time, getting access to data, getting the ability to publish. We provide them with lab and field equipment and training so that they can be real partners in science. Third initiative focused on the chemistry of plastics. We also want to ask ourselves, what else are we putting into products that make plastic breathe or be stiff or be flexible or have color? What are those chemicals? Because they're not publicly known and not revealed, and they are problems in and of themselves for recyclability. We have a fourth new initiative, which is focused on ocean heritage, thinking about how culture intersects with the the environment. The flagship project there, because this is brand new, is World War II ships that were sunk with their fossil fuels on board and who now, after 70 years, are beginning to leak. And we need to figure out which ones are going to leak, where they're going to leak, and figure out how to stop them from harming the environment around them, particularly in vulnerable places like Pacific Islands.
There are so many solutions that you're working on and promoting, and I wish we had time to talk more about them, and I certainly hope that you will return soon to give us updates on all these projects, because you are definitely providing the leadership to do the right thing, and I appreciate it very much. I appreciate your letting our audience know what's going on, what can be done. Thank you for being my guest.
My pleasure, and thank you very much for introducing our work to your audience.
You're welcome. I have been speaking with Mark Spalding, who is president of the Ocean Foundation. I'm Nancy Pearlman. Thank you very much for joining us, and do tune in again next week.
If you would like free information about these environmental issues, go to www.ecoprojects.org or call 310-559-9160. Environmental Directions with your host, Nancy Pearlman, is a community affairs program of the nonprofit organization Educational Communications and this station.